Hidden gems, too wild for the public. Jaw-dropping design, record-breaking power. Forgotten legends. Rare, iconic, ahead of their time. This is Matador Cars. Here we go. Subscribe to the channel.
Number 7. The 1967 Bizzarini 5300 GT Strada. Now, if that name sounds like a mouthful, that's because it is. Try saying it 3 times fast without sounding like you're ordering off the secret menu at Olive Garden. But this wasn't some spaghetti-shaped sideshow. This was an honest-to-God supercar before people even knew what a supercar was supposed to be. Here's the backstory. Giotto Bizzarini, and yes, that's the most Italian name ever. It sounds like a guy who'd fight Rocky Balboa in Rocky 4.5, used to be one of Ferrari's top engineers. This dude was the real deal. He worked on the Ferrari 250 GTO, a car that costs more than a small country nowadays. But he and Enzo Ferrari had a falling out because, let's face it, Enzo wasn't exactly Mr. Sunshine. So Giotto packs his wrenches, storms out the door, and says, "Fine, I'll build my own damn car, and it'll be faster than yours." Spoiler alert, he wasn't lying. Enter the 5300 GT Strada. It looked like a Ferrari and a spaceship had a baby. Then that baby started hitting the gym. Low slung, wide hips, shark nose, curves that could make a grown man weep. This thing didn't just look fast parked, it looked like it was doing 120 miles per hour while standing still. It was pure Italian drama in sheet metal form, with a little bit of American muscle thrown in for seasoning. Why? Because under the hood wasn't some temperamental Italian V12 that needed wine, cheese, and 3 mechanics to keep it happy. Nope, Giotto was smarter than that. He dropped in a good old Chevy 327 small block V8. That's right, Ferrari looks, Corvette guts. Think about it, Italian design with American horsepower. That's like pairing a tuxedo with cowboy boots and somehow pulling it off. The thing cranked out about 365 horses, which doesn't sound insane today, but in the late 60s, that was basically strapping a Saturn V rocket to your rear axle. And because the car weighed less than a sneeze, it could top 170 miles per hour. Let me say that again for the people in the cheap seats. 170 miles an hour in 1967, when most cars were still choking on smog and rocking AM radio. Now here's where it gets funny. The 5300 GT Strada was actually faster than a lot of Ferraris at the time. But Ferrari had the name, the fame, and the cash. Giotto, not so much. He was basically running a boutique car company out of a glorified workshop. It's like trying to compete with McDonald's when your kitchen is a backyard grill and a pack of hot dogs. Doesn't matter if your burgers are better, you just can't win that fight. And because of that, the Strada kinda got lost in the shuffle. People respected it, sure, but nobody was lining up outside dealerships like they did for a Mustang or a Camaro. Hell, most Americans didn't even know how to pronounce Bizzarini. They just look at the badge and go, whatever, I'll take the Chevy. But here's the kicker. Today, this car is basically a hidden treasure. A proper 5300 GT Strada at auction? You're talking millions. The kind of money that makes your financial advisor sweat through his Brooks Brothers shirt. Collectors drool over them because it was one of the rare times when East met West and actually worked. So, why is it forgotten? Simple. History's written by the winners, and Ferrari had the bigger megaphone. But gearheads in the know, they'll tell you straight. The Bizzarini was the real outlaw hero of the 60s supercar wars. It's like that band you love that never made the charts but blew your mind live. Not mainstream, but legendary. So the next time someone's going on and on about Ferraris, Lambos, and Maseratis, you just lean in and say, "Yeah, but have you heard of the 5300 GT Strada?" Watch their eyes glaze over, then drop the hammer. It was faster than half the Ferraris back in the day, and it had a Chevy V8. Boom. Instant car nerd street cred. Number 6. the 1954 Chrysler GS1 Ghia, the four-wheeled equivalent of Frank Sinatra singing on stage while wearing a tuxedo dipped in gold. Now here's the deal. Back in the 1950s, Chrysler wasn't exactly the sexiest brand on the block. Solid cars? Sure. Dependable? Absolutely. But they weren't exactly turning heads like Ferrari or Maserati. They were more Uncle Bob's sensible sedan than Hollywood Boulevard eye candy. Chrysler was making cars for people who wanted to get to work, not for people who wanted to steal the show at the Cannes Film Festival. So what do you do if you're Chrysler and you want to flex a little? You call up the Italians. Enter Carrozzeria Ghia, one of Italy's top design houses. These guys had the magic touch. They could take a hunk of metal and make it look like it belonged in a museum, or maybe a mafia boss's driveway. Chrysler fans them the keys, and boom, the GS1 is born. Now, this car wasn't mass-produced. Oh no, this wasn't your $2,000 and a pat on the back type of automobile. This was hand-built, piece by piece, with more love and care than Grandma puts into her Sunday lasagna. Only a handful were ever made, somewhere around a dozen, depending on who's counting. That means this car was rarer than a polite driver in New York City. Visually, man, it was a knockout. Sleek curves, long hood, just the right amount of chrome sparkle. It was like an American powerlifter who went to finishing school in Milan, muscular but classy. The GS1 had that unmistakable Italian flair, but underneath it was still good old Chrysler guts, a big, burly American V8 that purred like a lion on vacation. And that's what made it so cool. Italian style on the outside, Detroit thunder on the inside. Imagine sipping espresso while chewing beef jerky. It shouldn't work, but somehow it does. Here's the rub though. Cars like this were never meant for Joe Average. This was the playground of the rich, the famous, the people who never had to check their gas tank before payday. The GS1 was priced way out of reach for normal folks. It was basically Chrysler's way of saying, hey, we can do fancy if we feel like it. But because so few were built, the GS1 slid right under the radar. Most people never even heard of it. It didn't sell in numbers, it didn't get plastered on billboards, and it sure as heck didn't end up in high school parking lots. It was a ghost. Unless you happened to be standing in the right spot in the right city at the right time, you'd never even know it existed. Today, if one of these babies shows up at auction, the bidding starts in lottery winner territory. We're talking sell your house, your boat, and maybe your neighbor's house too kind of money. Collectors go nuts for them because it's one of the ultimate examples of that rare Italo-American mashup. Chrysler's muscle, Ghia style, and exclusivity that makes Ferrari look like McDonald's. So what's the lesson here? The Chrysler GS1 Ghia was proof that when America and Italy team up, you either get a car so pretty it makes angels cry, or a pizza with hot dogs stuffed in the crust. In this case, they nailed it. Number 5. Buckle up, folks, because this one's a straight-up fever dream from the land of pasta, leather shoes, and espresso. We're talking about the 1991 Cizeta Marauder V16T, the car that asked, why stop at 12 cylinders when you can have 16, and then promptly vanished faster than your buddy when the check shows up at dinner. So here's the setup. Late 1980s, early 1990s. Supercars were going nuts. You had Ferrari strutting around with their Testarossas, Lamborghini bringing out the Countach and Diablo, and Porsche being all German and smug. But Claudio Zampoli, an ex-Lambo test driver, and Giorgio freaking Moroder, yes, that Giorgio Moroder, the disco king who basically invented electronic music, said, amateurs, let's build something crazier. And boy did they. The Cizeta V16T wasn't playing in the shallow end of the pool. This sucker rolled up with a 6.0-liter transverse-mounted V16 engine. That's right, 16 cylinders. Not two V8s, not a stretched-out V12, but a full-on mechanical centipede jammed behind the driver. This beast pushed out around 540 horsepower, which in the early 90s was like showing up to a street race in a spaceship. And the T in V16T? That stood for transverse, because Zampoli thought it'd be a good idea to mount that enormous V16 sideways, like stuffing a Thanksgiving turkey into a shoebox. You pop the hood on this thing and it looks like a spaghetti dinner exploded in there. Styling? Oh man, it was pure Italian excess. Sharp lines, pop-up headlights, quad pop-ups no less, and proportions so wide and low you could have parked it under your dining room table. Marcello Gondini, the same dude who designed the Miura, the Countach, and the Diablo, was the guy behind the pen. And let's just say he didn't hold back. This thing looked like a Lamborghini Countach that went to the gym, ate steroids for breakfast, and then showed up in a tuxedo. But here's the kicker. As crazy and glorious as the Sizzetta was, it was also doomed from the jump. Why? Well, first off, it cost more than a small mansion. We're talking around $650,000 in 1991 money. That's before options, before taxes, before you even factored in insurance. Imagine trying to convince your wife you needed a car that costs more than 3 Ferraris combined. Second problem? The timing sucked. The early 90s recession hit hard, and suddenly the pool of dudes who could casually buy a 16-cylinder Italian spaceship dried up real quick. Add to that the fact that maintenance was insane. You don't just roll into Jiffy Lube and say, yeah, check my V16 real quick. Nah, you needed a pit crew, a degree in Italian swearing, and probably Giorgio Moroder himself humming synth beats in the garage. Oh, and speaking of Moroder, he bailed on the project pretty early on. They had a messy split, and the car dropped his name from the badge. That's right, even the Disco King looked at this car and said, "This is too wild, I'm out." In total, they built like a dozen of these things. Some sources say fewer. That's rarer than finding a payphone that still works. The car basically disappeared into private collections, only popping up once in a blue moon to remind people that yes, someone really thought building a V16 street car was a good idea. Today, the Sizzetta Moroder V16T is like an automotive urban legend. It's the Loch Ness Monster on wheels. You mention it at a car meet and half the guys squint like, wait, is that real or did you just make that up after too many beers? But here's the thing. For all its insanity, the Sizzetta deserves respect. It was proof that in an era of accountants running car companies, there were still mad scientists out there willing to say, forget the rules, let's build something bonkers. It didn't last, it didn't win, it didn't sell, but damn if it didn't leave a mark. The moral? Sometimes the coolest cars are the ones that crash and burn. And the Sizzetta Moroder V16T? That's like a Roman candle. Bright, loud, gone in an instant, but unforgettable. Number 4. This here is the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt, a factory-built drag strip assassin that was so wild, so juiced up on Detroit horsepower steroids, it skipped the whole dealership showroom thing entirely. Ford didn't make this car for you, me, or Uncle Bob to drive to the grocery store. They made it to do one thing: destroy quarter miles and hurt Mopar feelings. So picture the scene. Early 60s, drag racing is exploding across America. Ford's looking at Chrysler and GM, who are strutting around with their muscle machines, and Ford says, hold my coffee, we're about to unleash something biblical. And unleash they did. Out rolled the Thunderbolt, which, let's be honest, sounds less like a car name and more like a pro wrestler. Under the hood, a 427 cubic inch FE high-riser V8. This wasn't just any old big block, no sir. We're talking dual 4-barrel Hollies sitting on top like a pair of double-barrel shotguns, feeding this beast enough air and fuel to level a small neighborhood. Officially, Ford said it made 425 horsepower, but come on, everyone and their dog knows that number was about as honest as a used car salesman. Real world, you're looking at 500 plus horses easy. That's a stampede of angry steel Mustangs stuffed into a mid-size body. And speaking of body, Ford didn't just slap that engine into a Fairlane and call it a day. Nah, they stripped this sucker bare. Out went the radio, heater, sound deadening, and anything that smelled like comfort. You wanted AC? Too bad. You wanted a backseat? Forget it. You wanted to not go deaf after 10 minutes? Wrong car, pal. This thing was a rolling noise complaint with license plates. They even swapped steel for fiberglass on parts like the hood, doors, and fenders. The windows? Plexiglass. Yeah, you could scratch them with your fingernails, but hey, every ounce counts when you're hunting tenths of a second. Total weight? Just around 3,200 pounds, which, when combined with that monster engine, meant this thing launched harder than your cousin on a trampoline after 6 cans of Mountain Dew. Now, the Thunderbolt wasn't meant for normal humans. It was a race car you could technically buy from a Ford dealer if you had the connections and the checkbook. But let's be real, Ford didn't care about Joe Public buying one to impress the neighbors. They built just over 100 of these beasts, handcrafted for NHRA Superstock domination. And dominate they did. In '64, Thunderbolts hit the drag strips and straight up embarrassed the competition. We're talking quarter-mile runs in the low 11s, back when most fast cars were lucky to break 15 seconds. It was like bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. Mopar and GM guys were crying in their milkshakes. But here's the kicker. The Thunderbolt was so extreme, it basically got itself banned. NHRA said, "Okay, Ford, we see what you're doing, and we don't like it. You've taken factory stock and turned it into a science experiment." So the Thunderbolt was pushed out, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most hardcore factory drag cars ever made. On the street? Forget about it. Yeah, technically you could plate one, but let's be honest. It idled like a jackhammer, overheated in traffic, and would happily spin the tires through 3 gears if you sneezed on the throttle. Driving one to the grocery store would have been like taking a pit bull to a toddler's birthday party. You just don't do it. Today, Thunderbolts are holy grail cars. Collectors drool over them like teenagers over TikTok likes. Prices are insane. We're talking 6 figures easy, sometimes cracking $1 million if it's the real deal. And if you see one at a car show, you're basically looking at Ford's middle finger to the 1960s drag racing scene. So here's the lesson. Sometimes a car ain't about comfort, it ain't about looks, and it sure as heck ain't about daily driving. Sometimes it's just about making the other guy cry when the tree goes green. And the 1964 Ford Thunderbolt, oh baby, it was the crying machine. Number 3. The 1938 Hispano-Suiza H6C Dubonnet Xenia. And let me tell ya, this thing wasn't a car. It was rolling Art Deco sculpture, the kind of ride that made even the fanciest Rolls-Royce look like your uncle's rusty pickup. So first things first, Hispano-Suiza. If that name sounds fancy, that's because it is. It's Spanish for Spanish Swiss, which is about as bougie a brand name as you can get. These guys were building cars back in the 20s and 30s that made Duesenbergs look like taxis. We're talking clientele of kings, tycoons, and people who thought champagne was just breakfast orange juice with bubbles. Now enter André Dubonnet. This guy was not your average car customer. He was a French playboy, World War I flying ace, inventor, and, wait for it, heir to the Dubonnet operative fortune. Yeah, the dude was basically Gatsby with a pilot's license. If he wasn't racing cars, he was wooing ladies. If he wasn't wooing ladies, he was designing suspension systems. And if he wasn't designing suspension, he was probably drinking his own family's alcohol on a yacht somewhere. So what happens when a guy like that decides he wants a car? You don't just walk into a dealership and say, "I'll take the red one." Nah, you call up Hispano-Suiza, one of the most elite car makers on the planet. And then you hand the bodywork over to a crew of Italian coach builders who think normal is a dirty word. The result? The Dubonnet Xenia. And holy smokes, this thing looked like it came straight off the cover of a Buck Rogers comic. We're talking a bubble canopy of glass, aerodynamic fenders that wrapped around the wheels like it was slicing through the atmosphere, and a nose so smooth it made Cadillac tail fins look like children's finger paintings. From the side, the car looked less like an automobile and more like a spaceship that crash-landed on the Champs-Élysées. Underneath all that sci-fi styling was Hispano's legendary H6C chassis, powered by a massive straight-six engine that purred smoother than a jazz saxophone solo. But really, the power drive was just the excuse. The real star of the show was Dubonet's crazy obsession with futuristic design and suspension. He was testing out his new independent suspension ideas, so he built this whole machine as a rolling laboratory. Except, instead of a lab coat, it wore the sexiest Italian metalwork you've ever seen. Now here's where the story gets spicy. The Xenia was a one of one. That's right, there's only one on Earth. Dubinet didn't commission 10 or 5 or even a backup, just one. Probably because even the richest playboys in the world couldn't justify ordering 2 cars that looked like they'd been borrowed from Flash Gordon. And here's the kicker. When it debuted in 1938, people didn't even know how to react. Remember, most cars back then still had upright grills, big old running boards, and looked like your granddad's living room sofa on wheels. Then along comes the Dubinet Xenia. Glass canopy, streamlined body, doors that opened backwards like something out of a Jules Verne fever dream. Folks' monocles were popping clean out of their eyes. But of course, fate had to get in the way. See, 1938 wasn't exactly a great year to be unveiling wild luxury cars in Europe. A little thing called World War II was about to kick off, and suddenly people were less concerned with glass canopies and more concerned with, tanks rolling through their neighborhoods. So the Xenia didn't exactly get the spotlight it deserved at the time. Fast forward though, and the Dubinet Xenia becomes a legend. It survived the war, bounced around private collections, and today it's basically treated like the Mona Lisa of cars. You don't drive this thing, you escort it on a velvet pillow into concourse events while judges bow their heads in respect. And if you're lucky enough to see it in person, your jaw drops, because even now, nearly a century later, it looks futuristic. Like you could park it in front of Tesla HQ and Elon would probably try to claim he designed it. So what's the moral of the story? Simple. The 1938 Hispano-Suiza H6C Dubinet Xenia wasn't just a car. It was Andre Dubinet saying to the world, "I'm rich, I'm brilliant, I'm crazy, and I want a car that looks like tomorrow." And buddy, he got exactly that. Number 2. The 1970 Monteverdi High 450 SS, a car that sounds like it was named by Dracula but built in Switzerland, stuffed with an American Hemi heart. This thing is like if James Bond went on a ski vacation and decided he wanted a muscle car disguised as a Swiss watch. Exotic? Oh, you bet. Rare? Try Bigfoot riding a unicorn levels of rare. They made 2. Not 2,000, not 200, literally 2. You've probably got more forks in your kitchen drawer than Monteverdi cranked out of this beast. So here's the deal. Swiss industrialist Peter Monteverdi wanted to slap the world across the face and say, "Hey Ferrari, hey Lamborghini, y'all think you're fast? Hold my fondue fork." Instead of tinkering with a delicate little V12 or some fussy hand-polished Italian motor, he went full American sledgehammer and plopped in a 426 Chrysler Hemi V8, the same beast that terrorized drag strips and NASCAR ovals. The result? About 450 horses snarling to get out, hence the name, 450 SS. Now, this wasn't just a muscle car stuffed in a Euro tuxedo. Oh no, this thing was wrapped in sleek Italian coachwork designed by Pietro Frua. All curves, low stance, and enough glass to make you feel like you were piloting a fighter jet. The High looked like a proper supercar, but with that thundering Hemi, it sounded more like a demolition derby broke out inside a cathedral. The problem? Oh buddy, there were plenty. First off, putting a fire-breathing 7-liter Detroit monster inside a delicate Euro frame was like strapping a rocket booster onto your grandma's rocking chair. It went fast, but handling it was like trying to wrestle a grizzly bear on roller skates. Add in the fact that it overheated faster than a laptop running Windows Vista, and you had yourself a temperamental diva. And here's the kicker. This Swiss dream machine cost more than a Ferrari at the time. Picture yourself in 1970. You've got fat stacks of cash. Are you buying a car from Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, names dripping with sex appeal? Or are you buying something from a guy named Monteverdi who made exactly one showroom model before disappearing back into the Alps? Yeah, customers weren't exactly lining up. Hence, production ended at 2 cars. But let's give it credit. The Monteverdi High 450 SS was a wild mashup of cultures: Swiss precision, Italian style, and American brute force. Like an international rock band where the guitarist only plays at 11, the drummer forgets the tempo, and the lead singer is screaming in 3 languages at once. Total chaos, but glorious chaos. Today, those two high 450 SS cars are basically unicorns. They sit in collections, rolled out once in a while just to make Ferrari fanboys spit out their espresso. And even though it failed commercially, it still stands as proof that Peter Monteverdi had the guts to build a car that could punch way above its weight class. In the end, the Monteverdi High 450 SS is one of those cars that was just too rare, too wild, and too insane to survive. But hey, that's exactly why we remember it. 2 cars, 1 legend, 0 chance you'll ever see one at your local Cars and Coffee unless you've got a ticket to Switzerland and a billionaire buddy with a heated garage. Number 1. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. Now here's a car that makes your heart race just thinking about it. This wasn't some normal street cruiser. Oh no. This was Dodge taking one look at NASCAR and saying, "Hold my beer, y'all ain't seen nothing yet." They wanted to win, dominate, and embarrass the competition, and they did it in style, with a car that looked like a rocket ship on wheels. First off, you can't talk Daytona without talking aero. Dodge slapped on a 23-inch elongated nose cone and a giant rear wing, so massive that it practically needed its own zip code. This car wasn't designed for parking garages or narrow city streets. Heck, it probably could have taken off if the wind hit it just right. And that wing? More than just style, it was science. It created downforce like nobody's business, glued that muscle car to the track at insane speeds, and turned drivers into gods, or instant victims if they misjudged a corner. The powertrain wasn't messing around either. Under that sleek hood sat a big block V8 ready to throw you into orbit. With enough torque to make a freight train blush, this thing could rocket from 0 to 60 faster than a teenager sneaking out past curfew. Dodge wasn't building a car for Sunday drives. They were building a street-legal rocket to school the NASCAR boys. And boy, did it work. It dominated the tracks. Laps were being eaten like hotcakes at a Sunday diner. Competitors were left scratching their heads, and NASCAR officials? Well, they got nervous real quick. Here's where the drama kicks in. The Daytona was so fast, so aerodynamic, and so downright unfair, NASCAR had to step in and ban it from further competition. Yup, you heard that right. The car was too good. Imagine working your tail off, tuning your ride, and then watching this winged monster fly past you while NASCAR scribbled new rules. They literally said, "Nope, too fast, not happening." The Daytona became a forbidden fruit of the oval, a legend in its own time. But let's not forget the street version, the one that trickled down to normal people. Driving a Daytona on public roads was like piloting a missile with brakes from a go-kart. Those wings and that nose cone made it stand out like a sore thumb, or more accurately, like a rocket parked in a parking lot. You'd be turning heads left and right, probably making your neighbors jealous, while simultaneously hoping the suspension didn't fold under the weight of pure NASCAR glory. The Charger Daytona was more than just a car, it was a statement. Dodge wasn't messing around. They said, "We don't care if you're scared, this is how you win races." And win they did, even if it was short-lived. The Daytona became one of those mythical beasts, banned on the track, a handful to drive, and now worth enough money to make a small country nervous. Collectors today drool at the mere mention of it, and if you ever see one in the wild, you better snap a photo, because chances are it's a legend on wheels that could vanish faster than a gas station donut at 2 a.m. In short, the 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona wasn't just a car. It was a turbocharged, winged declaration of war against anyone who thought they could race. Too fast for NASCAR, too bold for the streets, and way too cool for its own good. A car that reminds us all, sometimes going too far is exactly how legends are made.